I'm Cathy, this is my March reading journal, and welcome to Lunar Bird Book Club. My March has got off to a bit of a rocky start. Last week on my lunch break at work, I nipped into town and I was wearing a fairly new outfit, some really nice wide-legged swishy trousers that I felt very smart in, very pretty and stylish in, but unfortunately they were just a little bit too long and a little bit too swishy and a little bit too wide-legged, and I tripped over them and fell quite spectacularly in the town centre. Fortunately, I'm all right, but when I landed really heavily on my knee, on my left knee, and it just kind of, sorry if you're squeamish, but it just kind of burst open. And was bleeding quite a lot, so I managed to get back to work and then get home, and then went to urgent care and got patched up in hospital. I mean, very fortunately, I've not broken any bones, but it's just quite a deep, ragged cut. So I got cleaned up. They put a nice bandage on. They couldn't do stitches or anything like that, but they've put a nice plaster on. I've had to take antibiotics because it was an open wound received on the road, and I got a tetanus booster. And so I'm kind of okay, apart from I really cannot bend my left knee properly. I can only bend it like a teeny tiny bit, and it's hurting quite a lot. So I'm walking around with a limp this month. Can't drive. I'm needing help from my granola to put my shoes on. But I've been to the doctors, I've been checked out. It's all going to be fine. I just need time to heal. And that might take a few weeks to get back to normal. Yeah, so if you think if I'm sat at a funny angle today, it's because I've got my leg up. So yeah, not great start to the month in terms of my life. But I have had a nice start kind of reading wise. I'm filming this on Friday the 13th of March, and so far, let me check my Storygraph. So far I've finished 5 books this month. Now the first one is like a little bit of a cheat because I actually started it in December, because Let Earth Receive Her King by Alistair Begg is a book of Advent devotions. And I read most of this in December, but then we went to Ireland for Christmas itself, and I forgot to bring the book with me, and by the time I came back, Christmas was over. So every now and then I remember that this book exists and I didn't finish it. Yeah, so I've been dipping in and out of it ever since, but I have finished it. I have finally finished it, and it's funny because the very last entry is a bit that's called After Christmas, a cure for the post-Christmas blues. So actually reading that in March felt quite fitting. This is a very nice book of devotionals, all about Jesus coming to earth as a baby and what that means and how it fits in salvation history, and some really good encouragement. And I'm glad I read it. It doesn't matter that I didn't finish it in December. I have finished it now, and I appreciate the reading of it. The second book I finished was the audiobook I was listening to at the end of February, and that is called The Plague Stones by James Brogden. This is a horror story, and I really enjoyed it. So the plot of this story is that a working class family in London find out that they have inherited a beautiful cottage in a rural village somewhere in like the West Country. But inheriting this cottage comes with a responsibility, because on the cottage grounds is one of the village boundary stones. And if you take on living in this cottage, you also take on being part of the village trustee and being a guardian of the boundary stone. And the family move and they take on that responsibility, only then to discover that the village is haunted by a ghost of a plague victim who many, many years ago, in the time of the Black Plague, this girl called Hester and her neighbouring village were denied entry into the village with the stones. And she has held a grudge ever since and is determined to murder all the guardians of the boundary stones. So this family have kind of walked into a nightmare. I really enjoyed listening to this book. It was really fast-paced. The horror was good. We jumped straight into the plot, and I think the thing that most either sells or wrecks a horror is how much you really are rooting for the main characters. And in this, the family is a mum, dad, and a teenage son. I was really rooting for them all the way through, and they were each trying to deal with the situation in their own way, and they all had their moments of brilliance, and also their weaknesses were exposed. And they and as a family, they go on a really good journey through this story. And the lore of the village and the things that the village has done to try and protect itself were really interesting. I think what I found particularly interesting in it, it was published in 2019, so just before the pandemic, which I found interesting because reading it, I was like, oh, is this a pandemic novel? Because there were feelings of claustrophobia in there, and there was also quite a strong emphasis and theme running through about privilege and class, because the family's working class and the village is more like upper middle class, and the village trustees are used to, how do I put this? They're used to looking after their own, and they've got privileges that have come from being in this position, and they have connections and a network that shelter them from society's ills in a lot of ways, even though they're vulnerable to this horrible ghostly attack. In a lot of ways, they're living the life of luxury and privilege. And that comes up quite a lot as the family have to avail themselves of that network to just try and, survive this paranormal onslaught that they are facing. And it was just interesting how I think horror often reflects the horrors of its time. It's always a bit of a spirit level or a temperature gauge of what is society fearing at the moment, what are people wrestling with. And I think a lot of people in like UK society, from like, the cost of living crisis post-Brexit, there has been an undercurrent of some people feeling like they have not, and other people that have. And, where's the equality, where's the fairness, particularly for like working class people. There was things in the story about access to the NHS, the education system, and it wasn't like ramming a message down your throat, but it was just interesting how there was a parallel horror between how do you get the help that you need in society and what is society meant to provide for one another, mirrored in this family trying to protect themselves from a ghost, but also mirrored in the origin story of that ghost, because it was about neighbouring villages and how they treated one another when they were going through the worst crisis ever. And do you stockpile resources? Do you share when sharing poses a risk to yourself? I don't know. As you can see, this story has risen questions in my mind, and I thought it was really cleverly done. So like at the heart, there was a really good, interesting, scary story. And around that, it was exploring issues in a really interesting way. And so, yeah, I think that's a book that's definitely worth your time. And I would read more from that author. So after I finished those books, I went to the library and I got myself a library haul. So that's always fun. Isn't it just great to go to the library and pick out whatever you choose, and knowing that there's no risk involved, because it doesn't matter if you end up loving the book or hating the book, you've gone and tried something. And that has been my experience with this stack. So I got out 6 books. I've only actually finished 2 of them, and I am going to return the rest. So I'll go through very quickly this stack and tell you what happened with it. So The Clockwork Girl, I read about 3 or 4 pages and gave up on it. It's set in Paris in 1750. I didn't follow through with it because in the first 3 or 4 pages, it painted a really bleak and nasty view of like the very poorest of the poor slums in Paris. It was written from the perspective of a girl who is a daughter of like the brothel mistress. Don't know what she's called. Matron? I don't know, a woman who runs a brothel on a day where I think the woman was going to decide which girls she was keeping and which girls she was going to kick out into the street. And to be honest, it was such a bleak opening of a book. And I just wasn't really in the mood for that kind of story, so I didn't go any further with it. Then Bitter Hall? How far did I get with this? Oh, again, so Bitter Hall. Again, it sounds really interesting. 3 people whose lives are connected through a flat share and a 19th century diary written by a dashing gentleman who may not be entirely dead. Really interesting premise. But again, I read the first few pages and I just found the writing. Oh, this is so mean. I just found it like a little bit pretentious and try hard, and I kind of gave up on it. Let me read you the opening line. I am on the swing in the garden, under the oak bough. Late August night, a couple of beers tipped over beside me in the short mossy grass, and my heart is a neat bundle of sticks, in love with the dead and the unreachable. Now for some, that line will draw you in. But for some reason, for me, when I read that line and the next few pages, it's all kind of in that style. I just rolled my eyes. I wasn't in that mood for a kind of heartfelt writing either, so I've put that down. Okay, then what you did, I read the whole thing of this. A girl holds a garden party and invites her old university friends over, and in the middle of the night, there's a commotion and one of the guests accuses the host's husband of raping her in the garden. And this woman has clearly actually just been attacked, like she's visibly bruised and hurt. And it's all about the fallout of that accusation. And does the host believe her best friend or her husband? This did hook me, and especially last weekend when I was having to rest up with my leg and I spent nearly all of Saturday in bed, I read through this quite quickly. So it hooked me in, it was interesting, but I will say, and again for some this will sell it to you, the thrills and the twists and the drama kept coming and coming and coming. There was always something like kind of crazy about to happen and be revealed. And I thought, like nearly all the way through this, I thought I'd figured out exactly what had happened, and I was wrong, and what had actually happened I hadn't seen coming at all until like it was there and being revealed. So credit for that. My issue is when I finished the book, I just felt a bit grimy because everybody in this book turned out to be so unlikable and weird. And actually when I just started reviewing, wow, so then that happened and he turned out to be that person and they were connected in that way. Oh my, it was such a lot of drama and pain and tragedy that they'd inflicted upon one another. I kind of didn't really buy it by the end. And also it just made me feel like, oh, what a horrible group of people that I've just spent, quite a few hours with. And, that just made me feel a bit icky. So like, if you don't mind that, you will love this. It's a good thriller. It did its job, but I felt like afterwards, maybe I would have felt happier if I hadn't read it. Do you know what I mean? Because it just left me feeling a bit icky. Twist is another book that I really thought I was going to love, and I only got a couple of chapters in and then I gave up. This is about a journalist who takes an assignment to go on boats that are launched from South Africa that travel around the oceans to fix breakages in the cables that deliver the internet around the world. So most of the internet is delivered by cables under the seas, and this is a book about the people who do that. And this journalist goes on one of these voyages, and on one of the voyages the captain's going to disappear. That's what I got from the back. And again, the writing style of this was just a little bit too worthy for my liking. This is definitely literary fiction, and sometimes I love literary fiction and sometimes I feel like it's a bit try hard and I feel a bit manipulated and it makes me cringe. And again, that I'm in harsh review mode today, but there we go. Again, the opening line kind of tells you, we are all shards in the smash up. Our lives, even the unruptured ones, bounce around on the sea floor. For a while we might brush tenderly against one another, but eventually and inevitably we collide and splinter. So again, it's literary fiction. It's written in a high style. So yeah, I read about the first 20 pages and there was just something that didn't connect me with it. This one, however, I read and absolutely loved it. This is Queen Victoria's Favourite Granddaughter by Ilana D. Miller. And honestly, I just picked this up because I thought I better read something non-fiction. And this is a biography of one of Queen Victoria's granddaughters who's also called Victoria. And this woman is also the grandmother of Prince Philip. And this biography just is a story of her life. She was born in like the 1860s and I think she died in the 1950s. And it occurs to me that I actually know very little about this period in history. So it was absolutely fascinating to read about her and who she was married to. And because she spent quite a lot of time in Germany, she married a German prince, duke, and had children in there. And then she moved around, particularly because of the 2 world wars. She actually had a fascinating life. And you know, the interesting thing is that I completely did not realise until partway through the book that her sister, Alexandra, there's talk of her younger sister Alexandra marrying into like the Russian royal family, and honestly it took me ages to put together that this is the Russian queen who was going to be assassinated by the Bolsheviks, when the Romanovs were massacred. And I didn't realise for ages that is who this was. That's her sister, and it just kind of brought that tragedy into a much more like real place for me. So yeah, the famous, lost Anastasia is this Victoria's niece. So it kind of connected to me like lots of little bits of like European history that I knew a bit of but didn't know much of, and connected it all through the story of one woman's life. So yeah, absolutely fascinating. And it's also one of those that I love this when this happens. There's a brilliant selection right in the middle of all sorts of photos of the royal family, and going through this lady's life. And she seems like a remarkable woman who held her family together through quite a lot of tragedy and huge amounts of change. And there were times where, her husband was a German duke who then kind of became a nationalised citizen who served in the Navy for many, many years. But then during World War II, because we're fighting against the Germans, a lot of suspicion was raised against him, and he gave up his positions to us not distract from the war effort. And there's a beautiful moment quite late in his life where his achievements for the Navy were recognised and he was kind of validated and reinstated. Really, really interesting. I enjoyed this thoroughly from cover to cover, and I never would have gone and bought it. Really, really pleased. The library trip was worth it to read this book. And then the last book I got from the library was The Britannias, another non-fiction about a woman who travels around all the little islands around Great Britain and wrote like a travelogue of it. Again, I read the introduction and again found it a bit too worthy. I don't know, maybe appealing to too many themes and ideals of what the islands are and what they represent, like the feminist icon, the outlooking, the cornerstones of our civilization. And that perhaps is all true, but sometimes when something it was hyped up too much and it kind of put me off. And I was like, you know what, but the introduction has to make a big sell because, it wants you to read the rest of the book. It always has to make it sound like the book you're about to read is the most important thing ever. And I thought, you know what, I'll read the first chapter and see if I like it then. And I honestly just read the first paragraph and I just thought, this isn't for me. So the first paragraph on the chapter of Orkney says this: darkness covers the island, the sun barely making a show. Nights everlasting, darkness out at sea, darkness in the mind. And so the people build an edifice to draw the sun back out. And I just didn't fancy it. So only finished 2 of them. Would only really fell in love with one, but the one I loved, I really, really loved. And since I'm clearly in a bit of a mood and struggling to find things to read, I've decided to read a Fables because this is always guaranteed to be a hit for me. So I'm reading Fables, Volume 12, The Dark Ages. I've just started that. And I'm also listening to Treasure Island. Oh, I missed one. I finished one more audiobook. And it's only really, really short, but I've just finished 84 Charing Cross Road. Amazing. I've had this on my reading list for so long and I wish I'd picked it up sooner because it's just my cup of tea. If you don't know of it, it's just a collection of letters between a New York writer and a British bookseller. They start this correspondence in the 1940s, 1949, and then they carry it through for years on end. And the New York writer is very bolshy, full of humour and wit, and then the British replies are very like polite and British and mild-mannered, but there's a little sparkling, hint of humour in there too. And this beautiful friendship develops between them. And it was absolutely glorious to read it. It's just full of warmth. And because Britain was under rationing when this correspondence started, the New York writer would send food parcels to all the people in the bookstore just to give them treats whilst rationing was happening. So her generosity and the care packages she sent kind of fueled this relationship, not just with like the main bookseller, but like the secretaries started writing to her saying, oh, thank you so much for the care package. Don't tell Frank I'm writing to you, but I've always wondered, what are you like? We love reading your letters in the shop. We all read them and we've all made an image of like what we think you're like, and we'd love to know more about your life and we'd love to meet you. So that was absolutely wonderful, and I'm really glad I listened to that too. So I listened to that. That was only short, so now I've just started listening to Treasure Island. Can I say I started listening to it and I only just realised that maybe I was drawn to it because, like Long John Silver, I'm also walking with a limp at the moment. So maybe I'm just leaning into the pirate vibes. I don't know. So anyhow, that's where we're at. That was a really long update. But yeah, that's where we are. It is Sunday the 28th of March. It is just about 5 p.m. and I've got the Sunday afternoon sleepies. This happens to me every Sunday. We always start out with a lot of energy. We do church, it's been great at church this morning. Then we have lunch with my mum and dad, and we had lunch with some friends today as well. So that was really good. And then it gets to the afternoon and we're back home and I just like completely slump. And I need my quiet time and I need my rest. So that's the kind of zone we're in right now. My knee is healing okay. I am driving again. I'm still walking with a limp and I can kind of move about okay as long as the trousers that I'm wearing are loose fitting. I've twice tried to wear jeans and it's been a big disaster. So, I'm getting there, but I'm a bit frustrated. It's difficult just not being able to move around like I'm used to, and I keep thinking like, oh, it'd be nice to go for a long walk, or I need to do that bit of gardening, or, I want to clean up in that corner underneath the desk, and I just can't do it right now, and that's a bit frustrating. But, I'm very lucky that this is only a short-term thing, and I am getting better day by day, and I'm sure in a couple of weeks' time I'll be moving normally again, but, I just don't have a lot of mojo at the moment. Reading wise, and I have also finished Fables Dark Ages. Again, another sad book. Fables Volume 11 kind of ended with a resounding victory, and in this volume a new enemy is introduced. A main character dies. I'm looking forward to discussing this more with Rachel, because Rachel and I have some differing opinions about Fables, and the character who died was one of my favourites, but it's also a character that I know Rachel doesn't care for that much, so that should make an interesting discussion when we get around to talking about it. So I finished Fables Dark Ages, and when I got to the end of that, I was again at the end of my TBR. So I got to reward myself with a reread. So I went to my bookshelf. This time I went to my bookshelf in the dining room, which has a lot of my non-fiction books, and I decided to reread Exploring the World of Lucid Dreaming, by Stephen LaBerge and Howard Reingold. I think that's how that is said. And this is a book that I read when I was like late teens, early 20s. And it's about lucid dreaming, which, if you didn't know, it's the practice of realising you're dreaming when you're in a dream and being able to control what happens. And this book is about the science behind that phenomenon and about people who can train themselves to do lucid dreaming and what practical uses we can make of our dreams when we are aware that they are dreams. So you can practice skills in your sleep, you can confront fears, you can seek out wish fulfillment, you can go on adventures, you can just get a mood boost from flying around the universe. So yeah, I really enjoyed this book when I was a lot younger, and rereading it, again, I'm finding it really fascinating to learn afresh about sleep and dreaming. And funnily enough, the first day I picked this up and I read the first 50 pages, it sparked something, and I managed to have a lucid dream that night just from like the memory of going through this once before. So that was fantastic. yeah, I dreamt that I was in a warehouse and I realised I was in a dream. So I was like, oh, I don't want to be in a warehouse. I want to be in a forest. So then I just like stretched out my hand, and wherever I pointed my hand, a tree sprung up out of the ground and just instantly grew up until I was surrounded by a forest, and then I flew through it. And then I woke up. But that was really cool. So yeah, I made a really good start with this book, and I read about 50 pages on the first day, and then I had a lucid dream. But then I've really slowed down reading this over the last week. It's just been a busy week. I've had a lot on, and again, with my knee playing up, like at work, I've not been venturing out the office as much and like eating at my desk and just trying to stay still, and I don't feel as comfortable reading at my desk as I do, you know, going off to a proper eating area on campus to read and eat there. So I've not been reading as much on my lunch break, and I've just been more tired at night, and it's just been a busy week. So that slowed me down. And then I've felt like a bit, you know, like I had a lucid dream that first night, and then every other night when I've gone like, oh, I wonder if I can do it again, I've not been able to do it. So I'm a little bit tempted now of, should I have a go at doing like the exercises suggested in this book, and should I have a serious go at relearning how to do lucid dreaming, because I used to be able to do it quite well, and maybe it would be fun to revisit that. But the other part of me is like, do I really want to take on another project right now? I already have a lot going on, like doing Luna Bird, doing things for church, doing my own writing, working, you know, being a parent. You know, we've only just got the kitchen done. Do I need another project right now? Like, probably not. Probably not. But, you know, I'm tempted. I'm tempted all the same. So, I have about 100 pages left of this to read, but, you know, I'm enjoying it, and hopefully I'll get it finished by the end of this month. And then the other book I've got going on is I am listening to the audiobook of Treasure Island. And again, I made good progress on the first day, and then I just keep not listening to it. It hasn't hooked me the way I thought it would. And I don't know why, because obviously it's about pirates, it's a classic adventure story. It's quite fast paced, it's a short book, and yet I'm just not that into it, but and I don't really have a valid reason why. But I feel like in the past I have attempted to read Treasure Island and then failed and put it down, and I've done that 2 or 3 times. The only version of Treasure Island I've ever made it through to the end with is Muppets Treasure Island, and as good as that adaptation is, you know, I think I really do need to experience the whole of the original story. So I'm determined I am going to finish it. Now that I am driving again and I can drive myself to work and back home from work, you know, that's another half hour a day I can devote to listening to Treasure Island, and maybe if I just power through, it'll be alright. So yeah, I feel like in the last couple of weeks I've hit a little bit of a bump in the road with my reading, and I just kind of need to pick myself up and power through and get my momentum back with it. Hello! Rachel's here.
Yeah, I've snuck in at the end of this one.
It's Tuesday the 31st of March. We're about to do some Luna Bird filming.
And I'm here.
And Ola's here too. And I just need to wrap up on the books I've read this month. I did film this clip originally last night and accidentally filmed it in slow motion.
Why do you always do that?
Because I was trying to change the setting on the camera because the camera keeps zooming in when I press record, and I don't know why. Okay. So maybe I changed it anyhow.
If there are any videographers in the room, please let Cathy know how she can fix that. It's a Sony something.
Yeah. So, books I finished at the end of the month. I finished reading Exploring the World of Lucid Dreaming. Mm-hmm. And I really enjoyed this. Oh, and I was partway through, I kind of thought, should I start trying to have lucid dreams again? Because I used to be able to do it. Well, the thing is, when I read the first 50 pages, I did it in one day, and then I had a lucid dream that night. And I was like, oh, I'm so good at this. And then I've not had one since. Even I keep trying half-heartedly the exercises. So I was a bit like, should I throw myself into trying to do this? Because it's a lot of fun. And then I realised I do not have time for another project in my life right now.
Fair enough.
That's ridiculous. But I really enjoyed reading this again. I hadn't read it in 15 years, so this was a lot of fun. And then I also finished Treasure Island, the audiobook, which I've tried to read Treasure Island several times and always failed. But
Even though it's a children's book.
Even though it's a children's book.
Yeah, but it's an old-fashioned children's book, so they're always less like a children's book, aren't they?
Yeah, and it's a classic and it's an adventure story and it's about pirates. Like, why could I not finish it? I don't know. I think I'd get to the middle bit and just be really bored when it's talking about ships sailing.
Okay.
But the last, third of it was really exciting and adventurous, and I'm completely in love with how the character of Long John Silver's created. He is so slippery. He is constantly changing sides.
That's a good name.
Yeah.
Long John Silver.
And he's like almost shameless with it. Like he's led the mutiny, but then partway through he decides, oh, actually, I might need to get back in with like the original people. And so like he uses young Jim as like kind of like a hostage on one hand. Then on the other hand, he's like, Jim, put in a good word for me with the others. And you can just tell at any moment he's always watching to see which way the wind's going to blow, and he's just going to do what's most advantageous to him. But yeah, he's quite charming. So he's what makes the book so good.
Have you ever watched Black Sails? It's a pirate show that's like a prequel to Treasure Island.
Oh, no, I don't think I have. Oh, maybe I should.
It's quite gratuitous in places, but I enjoy it.
Yeah. I watched Muppets Treasure Island.
I've watched Muppets Treasure Island.
And it's really good.
First time last year.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I really enjoyed it.
It's so good. And Tim Curry is like the perfect casting for that.
I think the guy who plays Long John Silver in Black Sails, I think he's called Luke Arnold. He kind of looks a bit like a young Tim Curry in my head.
Yeah. That's well, if Tim Curry ever plays a role, he will change the perception of that role forever. Like, because he's just so much Tim Curry. It's hard to not see Tim Curry in that role ever again.
Okay.
But yeah, so I finished Treasure Island. I've done it. I feel really good to tick that off. And then the last book I've read this month is All asked me when I was going to read the next Wildsmith book. Because she wants me to read these because she really loves these books. So I've read the first one and I read this in a couple of days. And I really enjoyed it. It's about a young girl, Rowan, who has a magical ability to communicate with animals, and particularly magical animals. And there's also a war going on, and the bad guys are trying to capture magical animals and use them in the war. And she's trying to save animals from that happening. So it's a really good adventure story, but my favourite thing about reading it is obviously it's a book that Ola loves and has wanted to share with me. And in a lot of Ola's reading life, it's been me, reading books like, oh, you'll love this, introducing her to like Beatrix Potter and Harry Potter and Narnia. So it's really special now that she's old enough to bring me a book and say, Mum, I've read this book and I want you to read it too. So that's all my reading for this month. I'm sorry, this is a very long vlog because I taught loads in the opening segment. But thank you so much for watching. There's going to be some more vlogs coming up very soon with me and Rachel together.
We're back. I just
together.
completely covered up the microphone. Sorry if that made a bash.
So thanks so much for watching. Hope you've enjoyed this and we'll see you later. Bye.